Hello and welcome to Unit 3 for the 1L course. We are into measurement. We are looking at measurement. That is the overall topic. Today what are we looking at? We're looking at reviewing the imperial fractions. So today's topic, we are looking at imperial fractions. So the goal, I can identify and work with fractions related to imperial measure. So you're wondering about, well, what are imperial fractions? Well, let's talk about that for a second. So our imperial fractions are as follows. So imperial fractions start off with what we call the 16th measure here. So the imperial fractions, we can measure down to 16th. You can get more accurate, but for this course, I'm just worried about you being able to move down and measure in terms of 16ths. So that's the smallest measure that we're going to worry about for this course. Now, some of you who have taken construction realize you can go down to 30 seconds, and it's possible to 64ths as well. So that's more along the lines when you get into some real precise machining. So this is the most accurate. From the 16th column, we move to the 8th. So that's the next degree of accuracy here. Now we're just going to bring across some of the fractions that apply here. So here we have 1/16. That doesn't reduce. So the 2/16 will reduce down to 1/8. 3/16 doesn't reduce. 4/16, that's 2/8. You start seeing the pattern here that every other line will reduce. So we get down to 4/8. And if we move down and finish that chart that's in front of you there, so we got 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and of course 8/8 or 1. All right, so 8ths are the next degree of accuracy. After the 1/8 of an inch, we often hear people refer to 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to have a degree in fourths. And again, what's cool is that, again, only certain ones will reduce. So when I look at my 1/8, it doesn't reduce any further, but 2/8, that'll reduce down to 1/4. 3/8 won't reduce. 4/8 reduces down to 2/4. 5/8 will not reduce. So I'm just reducing fractions to the lowest terms. 3/4 of an inch, and then 4/4 or 1. After the 1/4, we get down to divisions of 2, so 1/2 inch. So the seconds. So 1/2 inch, when you look at it, 1/4 won't reduce. 2/4 will, and that's a 1/2 inch. 3/4 won't reduce. And then the 4/4 will reduce down to 1 or 2/2. All right, and that's the least accurate we can really get in terms of our ruler. Now, what's kind of cool, the way I've set it up, for those that have a ruler, have seen the rulers before, you know that each notch on the ruler has a different length. Well, this is where that different length really comes from. It comes from the 16th, so that's the smallest notch. And then the 8th notches are a little bit longer. 16th is only 1. 1/4 inch goes all the way up here. And you can see this is where, if you were to hold an imperial ruler, and I'm going to pull one out here in a second, I'll show you how these yellow lines match up with the imperial ruler. All right, so we have 2 long lines, a bunch of short ones. So, pulling out my imperial ruler really quickly, and we'll match it up here. Oops, got to go the other way. There we are. So you can see how we have, and I'm looking at the ruler, there's a 16th. The one that's a little bit longer matches up with, oops, let's scroll up a little bit here. All right, I wonder if I can make this ruler really big to kind of match. There we go. Now we got some size going. Oops. All right, so this is the one I'm interested in up here. So when you look at that first 16th, here's the first 16th here on the ruler. Okay? As we move through, the next column went up to an 1/8, so it's a little bit longer. So it measures 1/8. The next one's a 16th, so it's just going to be a short one. The next one went all the way up to a 1/4 inch, so it's the next longest line after an 1/8. And again, the ones that did not reduce from a 16th are short lines, so they're counting by 16ths. The next longest line here, it's our 1/8 counter, and it's the next longest line, so it was able to reduce once. And the longest lines here Here we have, that would be a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then finally the full length here is 1 full inch, and then of course you have 0 inches up here. So this chart that I've shown the reduction on kind of lines up or matches with the increments on the ruler. And we're going to be able to practice with this ruler as we go. So let's talk about the imperial abbreviations here. So our imperial abbreviations, we're talking about, we have inches, we have feet, and we have yards. All right, so inches, they can be written as IN, but the one that I prefer the most is the double hash marks. So for example, 3 inches, it would be 3 with the double hash marks. Feet are usually FT. Again, 3 feet would be a single hash mark. And yards, to the best of my knowledge, it's just going to be YDS. You can't really get away from yards. Okay, so those are the 3 imperial abbreviations that we're concerned with this year. Next year we get into some of the other ones that exist. So there we are. There is your, what we call the imperial fractions. Okay, so we're going to be working with, when you get into the note a little bit, or get into the homework, you're going to be working with similar fractions. So you'll be 2/16 and an 1/8 are the same thing. So that's what we're practicing, is just getting comfortable with 4/16 is the same as 2/8 is the same as an 1/8 or a 1/4. So anyone that's taken shop before will have an advantage here, because construction, the reason we still teach imperial in Canada is because our construction industry still uses feet and inches, and that's because the Americans are a huge trading partner with us, so they still have the imperial system, so we have to match up and be able to use their system as well as ours. So that's not saying there are some carpenters out there and plumbers, etc., that use metric system, but very, very important that you're able to switch between the two. All right, so determine the value of the following. So 1/2 of 1 inch is, so I'm just looking at this, so 1 inch, well, that is the same as a 1/2. So what we're looking at here, you need to be able to go back and forth between fractions. So a 1/2 of an inch is obviously 1/2 an inch. That's pretty straightforward. What I'm looking for is the other forms of a 1/2 inch. Okay, so a 1/2 inch is the same as 2/4 of an inch, and we get that from using our equivalent ratio. So in the first unit, we talked about making equivalent fractions, right? So here, if we double the denominator, we do the same here. You're doubling the whole fraction. So you're making it, essentially you're making it bigger, or sorry, you're making the numbers bigger. It's the same fraction, same values. So you're kind of fattening it up here. So 1/2 inch, that's the same as 2/4. That's the same as 4/8. That's the same as 8/16. So we're only going to be working with denominators of 2, 4, 8, and 16, okay? Because those are the only ones that are imperial fractions. Anything else isn't our concern in this unit. So what about 1/4 of an inch? Well, 1/4 of an inch can't start with a 2 in the denominator, so we actually start at a 1/4 inch. As you move up, it would be 2/8 of an inch, and you go up one more time, so you double both top and bottom, 4/16 of an inch. So it's that I'm looking for, that you can switch between those fractions. What about 3/4 of an inch? So 3/4 of an inch, double top and bottom, because that's what we're doing here. We're doubling. If you notice, maybe I'll point this out again. It's just doubling. Times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. All right, so that's what we're doing, doubling top and bottom. So 3/4, that's 6/8, that's 12/16. Okay? So there we are, those are your imperials. So reduce to lowest terms. So the last thing I want you to practice, and again, I'm not going outside of the 2, 4, 8, 16 box. What happens if you have a fraction of 12/16 of an inch? If you're on the construction site or you're in a manufacturing shop and they say, hey, what's the measurement? And you say 12/16. Most of them are going to be okay with that because you're being accurate, but most of them will say, well, don't you mean, and then that's when you got to reduce. So 12/16, so that's 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so it becomes down to a level of sounding professional. So it is important that we can reduce fractions. Are you going to be lightning fast? No. As we go through and do our practice, we will get better. Okay? What happens if you measure 9/16? 9/16. What divides into 9? So you got your chart to look at. So the only things that divide by 9, or divide 9 evenly, are 1 and 3. 16 doesn't divide by 3, so this one is in lowest terms. 9/16. Okay? It's a bit of a trick question, so to speak. What about 8/16? 8/16. Well, 8 is just half of 16, so that means we have 1/2 of an inch. Okay? And the last example, let's pick, let's go 6/8. What happens if you take your ruler and you measure 6/8 of an inch? So reducing it, you can always do it in steps if necessary. If you divide the top by 2, you'd get 3 inches. Or sorry, 3. And divide the bottom by 2, you get 4, and you can't take it any further. So 6/8 of an inch is the same as 3/4 of an inch. So as I said, it's going to take practice, but by the time you get to this end of this unit and get some practice with the ruler, you're going to find that it's becoming a little bit more and more natural. And for those that are taking tech courses, you need to be ready to be able to do this or do these calculations, because we do work with the imperial system when it comes to the construction industry. So anyhow, there you go. Good luck.